You spend years trying to build, like, a bulletproof shell, acting like the perfect, totally self-sufficient adult. But eventually, you get so exhausted from being hard all the time that your shell just cracks. Not because someone broke it, but because your survival instinct is, well, desperately looking for a soft place to land.
Yeah, it is entirely exhausting. I mean, that constant daily performance of invulnerability,
Right.
it drains your battery faster than literally anything else.
It really does. And that cracked shell, that exact moment of exhaustion, is actually where we are starting today. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're unpacking some, incredibly profound concepts from a 3,000-year-old framework for understanding change. Specifically, we're looking at insights from the mind key to the etching.
Which, if you aren't familiar, it isn't just some historical artifact. It's basically this ancient psychological mirror.
Exactly. And today we're zeroing in on a specific dynamic called the bi-hexagram. Our mission is to figure out how you stop fighting your own isolation and actually build deep symbiotic relationships in a world that, frankly, seems completely obsessed with superficial networking.
The visual imagery they use for this dynamic is just so deeply practical.
Yeah.
So the bi-hexagram is represented by the elements of water over earth.
Okay.
And if you picture the mechanics of that, I mean, water naturally flows downward. It's fluid, but it has no shape of its own. It desperately needs a container.
Right, or it just goes everywhere.
Exactly. If water doesn't have a boundary, like a basin to hold it, it just evaporates. It turns into this anxious, empty mist.
It just spins out in empty circles, touching everything but nourishing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it. And then you look at the element below it, which is the earth. Now, earth represents a stable base. It's solid, it's heavy, broad, but without water to soften it, that stable base is just a barren, cracked wasteland. So you have these two elements that are fundamentally different in their physical properties, but they are entirely dependent on each other to create a living, breathing ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
It's like two puzzle pieces, right? You have the fluid human need for connection, and then the solid need for a stable foundation. But realistically, I mean, a lot of us are walking around like dry dirt. We're totally refusing to let the water in because we've been hurt. Or on the flip side, we're evaporating because we refuse to settle down and commit to a container.
Right. We avoid the structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we actually build this symbiotic system without losing ourselves? Because opening up is, well, it's inherently risky. We get burned.
It is incredibly risky, and the philosophy doesn't shy away from that reality at all. Before you even attempt to build a relationship, whether that's a romantic partnership or, I don't know, a business co-founding team or even a deep friendship, there are fundamental mindset checks you have to clear.
Like pre-flight protocols?
Exactly. It's about establishing basic rules of engagement to ensure you aren't just merging with someone else out of sheer panic.
Right. And the first major check is about really interrogating your own motives, like going back to the source. You're reaching out to build something genuine, or are you just trying to plug a hole of loneliness?
Precisely. Because a relationship that starts as a disguise for your own emptiness will just inevitably collapse under the weight of reality. You really have to ask yourself, are you looking for a connection or a distraction?
Yeah, but wait, let me push back on that a bit. Isn't loneliness like the primary biological driver of human connection? I mean, we are a social species.
Sure.
Are we really supposed to wait until we feel perfectly whole and completely devoid of loneliness before we text a friend or go on a date? Because that seems like an impossible standard.
No, and that's a really great distinction to make. It's not about eradicating the natural biological drive for companionship. It's about the difference between seeking a partner to build a house with versus seeking someone to act as a human shield against your own mind.
Oh, wow. A human shield.
Yeah. Think about how often people go to a loud, crowded bar on a Friday night just to avoid being alone in their apartment with their own thoughts. They aren't actually there to connect with the people around them. They're using those people for background noise.
That makes total sense. If you use people as a shield, the structure collapses the moment they need support from you. Like you aren't offering them water, you're just using them as a basin for your anxiety.
Exactly. Honest solitude is always better than fake noise. If your internal source isn't clear, the connection just becomes a mutual drain rather than a mutual gain.
Wow, okay.
And once you clarify that your motives are structurally sound, you then have to look at how you select your environment. You have to start viewing relationships like long-term assets.
Meaning you don't just pour your energy into the first crack in the earth you find.
Right. Water nourishes the earth through a slow, steady trickle, not a flash flood. You need to actively invest your time in soil that actually resonates with your core values. It's about structural alignment over immediate gratification.
Okay, so assuming my motives are clean and I'm looking for structural alignment, what about the opposite problem? What about the overthinkers? The people who stand by the pool dipping a toe in for 3 years before committing to a friendship or a career move, constantly waiting to see how things play out.
What's fascinating here is the cost of hesitation. Human systems don't wait for you to feel perfectly 100% ready. When a new team is forming at work or a new social dynamic is setting its foundational rules, that is the crucial window of opportunity.
Right, because things are still fluid.
Exactly. If you stand on the sidelines waiting for all the risk to magically disappear, you miss the window to help shape those rules. By the time you finally decide it's safe enough to join, the structure is already set in stone.
You're just an outsider.
Yeah, you've essentially lost your seat at the table. You exile yourself through excessive caution.
Wow. You just described half the people I went to college with. So once our mindset is right, we aren't acting out of panic, and we aren't paralyzing ourselves with caution. We basically embark on a two-part journey. We start as the dry earth, looking for water. And if we do it right, we eventually evolve into the water that nourishes others. Let's dig into that first phase, the journey of the self seeking a healthy environment.
Yeah, and this phase requires a level of vulnerability that most people find very uncomfortable. The foundational step here involves what is described as a sincere opening.
I was actually looking at this concept earlier, and it immediately made me think of a very specific everyday scenario. So imagine you move to a new neighborhood. One neighbor comes over in sweatpants, holding a simple, kind of messy casserole in a rough clay dish just to introduce themselves.
Okay.
Then another neighbor invites you over a week later for this perfectly catered, incredibly stressful, highly curated dinner party where you can't even figure out which fork to use and everyone is dressed to the nines. Which neighbor do you actually trust more?
Oh, it's the neighbor in the sweatpants, every single time. And the imagery used in our source material maps perfectly to that. It speaks to the value of a rough clay pot filled with clear water.
Right.
The inherent value isn't in the external packaging, it's in the purity and utility of what's inside.
I hear that, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. We live in a world that heavily incentivizes the catered dinner party. In the corporate world, or definitely on social media, aren't we explicitly taught to fake it till we make it?
Well, sure, society pushes that.
Right. Doesn't a highly polished, flawless image attract investors or partners or followers? You want to look like the polished bronze chalice, not the rough clay pot. Why would I show up to a metaphorical pitch meeting in sweatpants?
I mean, it might attract initial eyeballs, but it absolutely does not attract deep, durable connection. If we look at the psychology behind this, human brains are highly evolved threat detection machines. We naturally, subconsciously filter out overpackaged PR.
So we see right through it.
Completely. When someone presents a flawless, completely impenetrable facade, our guard immediately goes up because we fundamentally know it isn't real. We're waiting for the catch. We're looking for the hidden agenda.
It's almost like perfection is a closed loop. If you present yourself as flawless, you aren't leaving any hooks for someone else to grab onto. You're implicitly telling them you don't actually need them.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. But when someone has the courage to be a rough clay pot, like when a senior leader sits in a high-stakes meeting and says, "I'm actually not sure about the answer to that. Can you help me?"
Yeah.
It instantly lowers the neurological defenses of everyone else in the room. They realize they are in a safe environment where they don't have to perform either. True magnetic gravity comes from what you are, not what you look like.
Yeah, physical and mental relief is just palpable. Perfection is so exhausting to be around. But here's the catch. Once you drop the act, once you show those hooks and open up like that dry, cracked earth, people start responding. You suddenly get invited to everything. People want your time. How do you filter all of that when you can't possibly do everything?
That requires a mechanism called internal resonance. Just because the earth is open doesn't mean it should absorb every single drop of liquid that comes its way. You have to align purely on energy and values.
How do you even measure that?
You stop making decisions based on external pressure or what looks good on paper, and you start paying close attention to what happens inside your physical body.
Yes. Think about when you get invited to an obligatory networking mixer, the exact kind, where everyone is aggressively handing out business cards and looking over your shoulder to see if someone more important is in the room.
Oh, absolutely. The worst.
Your stomach literally knots up just looking at the calendar invite. The internal resonance approach means you actually decline that and instead choose to place yourself where your nervous system relaxes.
And that physiological response is no accident. It's neuroception. Your body detects a misalignment of values before your conscious brain can even articulate it. If a connection requires you to betray your internal state or put your armor back on just to fit in, it's draining your life force.
So you just have to say no.
Yeah, you need to absorb only the water that naturally matches your frequency.
But what happens when our threat detection fails? Because we all make mistakes. What happens when we are so thirsty for connection that we drink poison water?
This raises an important question because it happens to the best of us. You connect with an environment or a person that completely drains you. It's not necessarily that they are intentionally malicious, it's just that the dynamic is toxic to your specific root system.
But people stay. We see it all the time. It's the WhatsApp group chat that just complains all day, or the romantic relationship that constantly belittles you. And you stay because of sunk costs or because you develop this hero complex. You think, if I just stick around, if I just pour enough love into this, I can fix them. What is the emotional mechanism that keeps us trapped there?
The illusion of fixing someone is a profound trap. When you try to heal a toxic environment without boundaries, you act as a biological filter. You are taking in poison, processing it through your own emotional system, and trying to output clean water for them.
Wow.
That destroys your own structural integrity. You cannot nourish a toxic environment without becoming toxic yourself. The only solution at this stage is to realize the physics of the situation. You have to draw a hard line and quietly step away.
Just cut it off.
Right. It's not about staging a dramatic confrontation or demanding an apology. It's simply a clean break to protect your own ecosystem.
So what does this all mean? It means if we manage to do that, if we set those boundaries and stop leaking our energy like a broken bucket into toxic spaces, we start to accumulate a surplus. We finally build up our own foundation, and that surplus naturally spills over. We transition from being the earth seeking water to becoming the water that connects the rest of the environment.
That is the pivotal transition. The perspective completely flips. You are no longer the individual seeking shelter. You have accumulated enough internal security to become the gravity center that supports others. You become a bridge.
How does that look in practice, though?
In sociology, there's a highly researched concept known as structural holes. Imagine two completely different groups of friends or two siloed departments in a massive corporate organization. They don't interact at all.
Okay, like marketing and engineering.
Exactly. The space between them is a structural hole. The person who steps into that gap, who speaks both languages and naturally connects those two worlds, becomes incredibly invaluable. They are the reliable number two, the silent node that makes the entire larger system function smoothly.
My analogy for this is being the router in a Wi-Fi network. You don't own the internet, and you aren't the laptop executing the tasks, but absolutely nothing functions without you facilitating the connection.
That's a perfect modern way to look at it.
But I can see a massive shadow side to this. The problem with being the Wi-Fi router is that no one ever notices you when the internet is working perfectly. They only come to you when something is broken, and they need you to fix it. Being the bridge can become incredibly emotionally taxing.
It is deeply taxing, and that emotional tax leads directly to a very dangerous shadow behavior. When people feel underappreciated in that bridge role, they often mutate from a bridge into a toll booth.
Oh, wow. Because you realize you have this bottleneck power. If you are the only connection between the engineering department and the marketing department, you might start holding information hostage to force people to acknowledge your value.
Exactly. You start extracting a fee, whether that's ego stroking, favors, or just pure control for every interaction. But the moment you privatize a public bridge, you destroy the organic trust that gave you influence in the first place.
Because people hate paying tolls.
Right. People inherently resent toll booths. Eventually, they will figure out a way to build a bypass around you. True, lasting influence at this stage comes from facilitating the flow of information and goodwill, not restricting it.
Which perfectly sets up the concept of relaxed gravity. Here's where it gets really interesting. How do we maintain influence without becoming a controlling toll booth? You mentioned an ancient metaphor earlier about a three-sided hunt. Paint that picture for us.
So in ancient times, when a king or leader would go on a ceremonial hunt, they wouldn't surround the animals completely with a closed net. They would set up beaters on three sides, but intentionally leave the fourth side wide open.
Okay.
If an animal naturally ran toward the open side, they simply let it go. They only engaged with what naturally remained within the boundary.
I understand the metaphor, but let me push back on how that translates today. In modern business, or say in a modern marriage, leaving the door wide open feels like a recipe for getting walked all over. If a manager says, hey, team, do whatever you want, leave if you feel like it, how is that not just negligent leadership?
It's not negligence. It's the ultimate form of autonomy. We have to differentiate between completely abandoning the net and leaving one side open.
Okay, clarify that.
You still provide structure.
Yeah.
The three sides are your vision, your support, and your boundaries. But you allow choice. Think about the most charismatic, effective managers you've ever had. They give their teams total autonomy to execute. They don't micromanage every keystroke.
Or in a romantic relationship, it's the partner who doesn't obsessively check your phone or demand to know where you are every single second.
Yes, because if you build a four-sided cage, you might physically keep people there, but they are prisoners. They are looking for the first opportunity to escape.
That's so true.
If you leave one side open and they choose to stay, that is genuine loyalty. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you don't chase people who want to leave. True security comes from granting freedom, not building walls. Charm relies entirely on freedom. When you are that secure in your own core, people naturally want to orbit you. That is relaxed gravity.
Charm relies on freedom. I really like that. I can see how that relaxed gravity works when you're already in the flow of the relationship and the trust is established.
Yeah.
But what about getting into the water in the first place? It feels like the exact opposite problem is also true. People who are so terrified of leaving the net open that they just stand on the shore forever.
And that brings us to the tragic figure in this entire philosophy, the hesitant island. The person who waits for the absolutely perfect, completely risk-free moment to join the project or commit to the relationship.
Right.
They stand on the shore, constantly analyzing the water temperature, calculating the speed of the current, checking the weather forecasts, waiting for the perfect day to swim.
I see people do this with their careers all the time. The perpetual student. Like, I just need one more certification, I just need one more month of market research, and then I'll launch the business.
And while they are analyzing, the river changes course. Someone else launches a messier, imperfect version, learns on the fly, and captures the market.
Yeah.
By the time the overanalyzer finally decides they are ready, the group has already bonded, the trust has already been built, and the opportunity has completely passed them by on a dry bed. Perfectionism in this context is often just procrastination driven by fear. Sometimes you just have to jump into the flowing water and adjust your posture while you swim.
Wow. Okay, let's synthesize all of this.
Yeah.
This journey we've just mapped out, it fundamentally flips the script on how we are taught to navigate life. Building a secure system for yourself isn't about having the hardest, thickest armor. It's actually the exact opposite. It's about having the courage to drop the act, being that rough clay pot, and finding the true frequency where your nervous system naturally relaxes.
And then, crucially, taking that internal security and turning it outward, becoming a seamless Wi-Fi router for others rather than a demanding toll booth.
And eventually generating that relaxed gravity, the three-sided hunt. Creating an environment where people stay in your life because they genuinely want to, not because they are trapped by guilt or obligation. So, to you listening right now, I want to challenge you directly. Think about your current relationships or the team you manage at work. Are you desperately gripping the steering wheel, trying to control every possible outcome and trap people in a four-sided net? Or are you creating an open field where trust can actually grow on its own?
It is a really difficult transition to make, requiring a lot of unlearning. But I want to leave you with one final lingering thought from the conclusion of our source material.
Yeah.
Let's say you do all of this perfectly. You drop the armor, you build the connections, you become the center of gravity. You successfully build this massive network of consensus, mutual reliance, and deep trust. A strange, almost unsettling paradox emerges.
Wait, what's the paradox?
The bigger and more successful the system gets, the more fragile it secretly becomes.
Wait, really? Why would building deep trust make something fragile?
Because as the network grows, the expectations placed upon you multiply exponentially. External scrutiny intensifies. Everyone is relying on your gravity to keep their orbits stable. Building the connection was just the first step.
Oh, wow.
Now, before you can actually utilize all this massive gathered energy to achieve a goal, the entire system must enter a phase of eerie silence to accumulate strength. You have to pause. It is exactly like the dark, heavy clouds silently gathering right before a massive storm breaks. The system is full, but it must wait for the right atmospheric pressure to release.
Oh, that gave me actual chills. So the cracked shell at the very beginning of our journey wasn't a failure at all. It was just making room for the storm that was to come.
Such a brilliant perspective. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a hard look at your own armor today, stay curious, and keep exploring.